Welcome to Stand Up for Doctors. I'm your host, Kim Downey. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to welcome Dr. Jennifer Lycette and Wanda Fox. Thanks for joining us today, Jennifer and Wanda.
Hi, Kim.
Hey, glad to be here.
I'm really happy to have you both. And I usually start by sharing how we met. And Jennifer, so last year on May 1st, I sent you a message saying that I really liked your Kevin MD article about writing and storytelling. And I said that my story is different from your story, but that I could relate in many ways. And you thanked me. And then we've commented, I think, here and there on each other's posts. And then you reached out in January saying you were enjoying following my posts and podcasts. And you told me about your most recent book and offered to send me a copy. And here it is. The
All
committee will
right.
tell you now. So I read it and we'll be discussing that. And then Wanda. So Wanda, I'm not exactly sure when we first connected, but I think we were following each other a little bit. And then on September 26th, you sent me a message and you said, "Good morning, Kim. Thank you for your comments and response." So I had commented on one of your posts, and you said, "When do you have time in your schedule to connect via video chat?" And we talked the very next morning. So that was fun. We had a great conversation. And now we're all here together because people say connecting people is my superpower. And I thought you were both really kind and interesting. And I thought this would be really fun to do it together. So today we'll be talking about Jennifer's book and how many issues facing doctors today are covered in this novel, which has an element of historical fiction. And Wanda is a holistic wellness entrepreneur. And she had shared with me the circuitous route her career path has taken when we talked the last time, and I found it to be fascinating. So as we get started, we can go ahead with Jennifer. And what would you most like our audience to know about you?
Oh gosh, that's such a great question. I guess I would like to start by saying that I found my inner writers in my 40s. It kind of emerged in the middle of burnout, and as I had written about in that Kevin MD article that you mentioned when we first connected, I had a unique experience where at a writing event. It was actually a narrative medicine event in Portland, Oregon. I started chatting with a woman, and it turned out she was a life coach. And there's, of course, nowadays a lot of info, and there's even been studies about the benefits of life coaching for physicians. But um, this was about, like, oh gosh, I want to say like maybe about 6, 7 years ago. And I had no idea what a life coach was. So I took her card, and then I looked at her website, and she had a very unique platform where she uses storytelling as a metaphor for your individual life journey. And I was in the middle of writing my first novel, which is over my shoulder right there. And it was a sort of parallel journey of exploring my own journey so far, like my career and where I was at in medicine, which was unfortunately like in the depths of burnout. And I had actually left medicine altogether for a year. And then working with her to pull myself out of there, and realizing that to my surprise, I had a creative side, which I had really suppressed all my life because I had a very traditional path. Like, I was a biochemistry major, and then I went to medical school, and then, residency fellowship job. I try to be just really open about my journey and embracing being vulnerable and authentic. And now I write fiction, which I find some colleagues think is kind of odd, but it's really enriched my life. And I have made so many connections through writing, like, I mean, evidenced by here, us all connecting. And it's just been amazing to me that, compared to like professional networking through medicine, like I've met so many more people through writing, and people outside of medicine as well. So that's maybe a little bit longer than you wanted to hear
No,
from me
not at
about my
all. No, I
background.
love that. Thank you very much for sharing. And Wanda, what would you like us to know about you as we start this conversation?
The simplest way to sum it up for me, there's two words. Well, maybe more. I'm a people person. I just love connecting with people, but I'm a massive networker because I'm always thinking, okay, who can I introduce somebody to? And I like to say, even raise my kids this way, you can't know everything, but you might know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And I love to operate that way. But I think first and foremost, because I was a shy, introverted kid growing up, and that really hampered me when I finally found my voice. I just I feel such an empowerment in it when I use that voice to encourage others and to lift other people up. So I think that's why I call myself a people person.
Oh, well, I really love that. Well, thanks for sharing. And so Wanda, as we start, I mean, Jennifer, as we start talking about your book, there were so many themes. So obviously I've been involved in these spaces for a year or so now, and I had read all the Kevin MD articles, right? He posts like 4 or 5 a day, and I'm connected with so many doctors. So I'm familiar with the issues facing physicians today. And I was very impressed with how in this novel, that you just incorporated so many of them. So if a person who is non-medical is reading it, they will become aware, or you just put things in there. And just some of the things that I noted in there were all these things that you cover: trauma, shame, and regret in medical training, racism, sexism, physician suicide, excessive work hours, medical error, lack of an apology, silencing and cover up, thinking it's just you and that everyone else is fine, the rationing of dialysis, end of life decisions, and fast food, how doctors don't have time to get a good meal. They're telling their patients to eat healthy, and then they're, catching fast food on the way home. So, what would you like to talk about in relation to your book? Because there are so many things, we could talk for like hours.
Yeah. Well, gosh, that's just amazing feedback. And those are all themes I tried to incorporate. And I guess by way of a little background, like why did I write this book? I think it actually dates back to, I can't remember. I was at a conference about 10 years ago, and it was uh, not a conference just for physicians, but it was like for all healthcare. And so there were obviously nurses and respiratory therapists and physical therapists and all ancillary positions. And um, it was and my hospital that I was working at that time sent me to this conference, as it was like I had received like one of the hospital awards for like you know caring physician or something like this. I don't even remember the details. Um so it was like a holistic conference, and it I still remember it because it was the first time I'd been to a conference like that wasn't just like medical focused or oncology focused, which is my specialty. And so I remember sitting in this one small group session, and I was the only physician in the room, and um it was a discussion about, the stressors and pressure. And then I remember a woman like turned to me and she said, "What happens to you all?" She,
Mhm.
she was like, "Can you just tell me like
Right.
what happens to you all as young doctors? Because you start out so idealistic and then so quickly you become like so jaded and cynical." Um and of course the answer basically took a book to write.
Right.
So I've been kind of thinking about that all these years. And then specifically this story is it's told from the viewpoint of one of my characters in my first book, The Algorithm Will See You Now, which is a set in the near future. So I wanted to tell the backstory of a couple of my characters in that book. So Noah is the protagonist, and he's an older sort of mentor type character in the first book. And then this book jumps back to when he was intern in the 1990s. And um, it's also the story of a young surgical resident named Mara Maddox, who is the antagonist or the villain in book one when she's also way farther in her career. And I wanted to tell their story, which is very intertwined, and I wanted to include these historical sort of hidden histories in medicine, and to do it through fiction and their journey to hopefully like reach more of a non-medical audience.
Wow, well, that's great. And they're both very interesting. And it's also okay if you read this one first, right? So
Yeah.
they're
So
standalone. They're also they're standalone as well.
yes, they're they overlap with a couple of the characters, but they're they're you could read them in either order. Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Yeah, great. Well, and then so Wanda, why don't you share with us a little just about your journey with your professional career, because it's so fascinating and you've done so many different things.
My passion has evolved into mental well-being because of my passion, because of my corporate career and then leaving corporate because of a toxic job and burnout, just working too many hours. And then I was always an entrepreneur at heart, but it kept leading in another direction. It's like, but there's more. There's more I want to do. There's something more. So it evolved into this where then I became certified as a mental wellness coach, and then having my own struggles, my own life journey, like we all have, the hills and the valleys, the high points and the low points. And then I began to understand, if you're a living and breathing soul, you have mental wellness. And if you don't have a handle on your mental wellness, it affects everything else in life that you do. Mental wellness is multifaceted. It can be affected by so many things. And I'm not a surgeon, I'm not a neurosurgeon, so I don't know that aspect. But what I do understand is how, when our mental wellness is compromised, the space that it can take you to. And that can be a very dark space, and you can't see your way out. And I love what some of your podcasts have mentioned about sharing your story. And I feel this way too. It's in sharing your story that the masks start to come down and you start to find the answers. And that's where I come in. And that's why I say I'm a people person. It's listening to the stories and coming up with solutions, and what Jennifer alluded to on the holistic protocol. So I love the medical profession in that I'm a beneficiary of it. But for sustainability and for alignment for a long term, for me, I chose the holistic protocol, the holistic approach to it, because it was in alignment with where I wanted to be. So I think the two coexist very much so in the medical world, and the holistic approach. So I'm not the neurosurgeon. I am not the scientist. I'm the person that comes from a holistic approach, a supplement-based, a lifestyle approach. I'm huge on connecting with the blues and the greens, the outdoor, and just the forces of nature that we can empower and harness for our own benefit. But the big part of sharing your story, because I know what it's like, and this was alluded to on one of your podcasts, about suppressing feelings and sucking it up. I'm okay. That seems to be the the way we operate in this society, and it's not healthy. Sharing our stories and letting our masks come down is where we can help ourselves, but then it's where we can help others as well.
Right. That's beautiful. I love that. And I've said, as far as for doctors, every time a doctor shares their story, another doctor feels less alone. And patients have stories too. And I think some of the most beautiful things we're doing is what we're doing right here. And we're bringing doctors and patients together, right? So we can all share our stories. And before we go back to Jennifer, so Wanda, this morning when you speak of neurosurgeon, so you actually responded to my post today where I actually just shared an episode with a neurosurgeon, right, that I recorded, Dr. Mark McLaughlin, and it's a powerful episode. And I wrote down your comment. I loved it. A support system to support mentally, physically, and emotionally is the best three-legged stool, balanced. Did you want to speak to that for a moment?
Well, if any one leg of that is kicked out, you're off balance. So speaking to the podcast of the doctor, and he's a neurosurgeon, they're brilliant. They save lives. But on the flip side, they have mental wellness stressors the same as people that are not neurosurgeons, and they all have to be dealt with. So that comes that three-legged stool. If something is kicked out from under you, you are going to be off balance. And being off balance is what will take you to a dark space.
Right, exactly. And then in leading into that, in Jennifer's book, there it does deal with physician suicide. And I was wondering, Jennifer, if you wanted to speak a little to that and how you decided to incorporate those elements into your book.
Yeah, it's I think it's still something that is not talked about enough. And I felt like, to answer that overarching question of, what happens to you, like what happens to young medical students and trainees, it had to be included. Um, I'm finding it kind of hard to talk about because I just saw on social media today that there was a death of a resident by suicide, and I I'm not on social media a lot during the weekdays when I'm in clinic, so I just saw that this morning, and it just um, brought to mind that after some of my family members read my book who are not physicians, a couple of them like separately and individually pulled me aside, and they said, almost like they were afraid to talk about it. I think they actually both like whispered. They said, well, that what you wrote about, that doesn't still happen, does it? And they were shocked when I told them that it does, and that the statistic of the number of deaths a year has stayed around 400 ever since I've been in training, which was also I started medical school in the late 90s, and um, then to see that news today, and I don't know any details, or so don't want to claim to speak to that at all, but it just you can tell I'm like having trouble talking
Yeah,
about it because
no,
it
yeah.
it just struck me that, oh my goodness, we're going to be talking about this today. And I think, like, again, like some people not in medicine, like my family members, like because I said it back in the 90s, they thought maybe it wasn't still happening. And so um I also drafted this book in April of 2020, when, right, that sort of first months of the pandemic. That was actually when I wasn't practicing. I had left practice shortly before the pandemic, and then I went back in the first year of the pandemic. And um, that was kind of that month for, if anyone knows who wasn't working, we all sort of, you know, secluded in our homes and took on projects because it seemed like at first it was going to be over soon. And so I've never written so consistently in my life, but I just dove into this project. And then there was the news of the death of the ER physician in New York, Dr. Lorna Breen, who, again, I did not know personally or know anyone who knew her. I'm on the West Coast, but as I read about her, I realized she was my exact age, and I just felt I felt like she could have been my sister or something, and it just really affected me very powerfully. And I've followed with interest and gratitude the work of the Lorna Breen Foundation. And even my state, Oregon, has recently changed their licensing or credentialing. There used to be this checkbox where you had to say you had never sought help for mental health. Like, how ridiculous is that, right? But that's, again, what I touch on in the book is the character, like he's afraid to reveal to anyone that he has this anxiety and panic attacks because he's afraid he'll get kicked out of the program or not be able to get his license. And that's still in the credentialing of many states. And so they've been working very hard to change that. And it is slowly changing. Which, just like you said, Wanda, about like it's a leg of the stool. You can't have a balanced life without it. So So I might have got a little off topic on your question
Not
there,
at
but those are
all.
all the
Not at all.
things going through my mind today.
Yeah, no, and that's what we want to talk about is what's on the hearts and minds of my guests. And Dr. Joe Sherman, when I interviewed him in December, and we talked about Physicians Anonymous, and he said what should come after that question on the licensing is it, have you sought help? And if not, why not? Right? And he shares
Absolutely.
that he has, a counselor, a coach, and a spiritual advisor. We need the support.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so Wanda, if you would either like to speak to anything that Jennifer said that brought to your mind, or share what has helped you when you've been in some of your darker places.
Well, I love that Jennifer's bringing that to the conversation table, and we're speaking about the medical field. We're speaking about doctors, and I had read an article of a young physician intern in the UK, and he had taken his life, but it was because of his financial burden. And I think that that is something that should be addressed, is financial trauma. And he said we are taught how to save lives, but he said we were not taught how to manage our financial burden. And financial trauma is a huge component of mental wellness. I think that might have a lot. That's my assumption. My energetic field around it. That is a huge component that we're dealing with right now in this in dealing with the pandemic, if you want to call it that, of suicide. So where I come in is, what can I do for stress resilience? And that is what my whole studies, what I have learned. And there are simple approaches to that. I am an advocate to have a therapist, to have a coach, to have a spiritual advisor. I've done so much of my own energy, emotional work. I've done my background ancestral studies. I know that I like to tell people, oftentimes this is not your fault. A lot of this could be what we call inherited, unresolved generational traumas. And there's studies I've done on that, scientifically backed. So there's multifaceted. So when you've got that component of it, then you add in the stressors of going through internship, and then you've got the ghost, or whatever you want to call it, in the back of your mind. I've got this burden of debt. How will I ever repay that? And then you've got, you could call it a burden or your gift, whatever. If you're a neurosurgeon, it is a burden on you for life-saving measures. I was listening to that podcast, earlier, about a doctor going in. I was so glad to hear him flip the script, though. He was ready to cancel surgery, and he did it. And he devoted it to his dad. And that's the power of thought. And I think when you can harness the power of your gut, which will harness the power of your mind and your thought. And I think that is so, so powerful. So where I come in is supporting people with their stress resilience. And I'm so glad, even though Jennifer's book is written as fiction, it's so relatable in layman terms that people can understand. And that's probably what's made it a top seller. It's so relatable.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Those were all great points that you shared. And even intergenerational trauma, I suspect that there's people that might not believe in that, and that to one degree it can be like say, parents that or grandparents or great grandparents that survived the Holocaust, right? That somehow there's some of that inside of you and can affect you. But I just this week was attending the World Congress on Moral Injury and Trauma Informed Care, and they talked about that and how there's studies about even with rats. So say every time, I'm making this part up because I don't remember the details, but say every time they gave a rat a carrot, they would also shock it, right? And then they would track these rats for generations, and it could have been like 8 generations later, like the rats were like afraid of a carrot, something like that. So that was kind of proving along those lines. And I'm sure there's many more. And then, and Wanda, if you have a reference that you want me to put it in our show notes or something, or or on your website, or just when people can reach out to you if they wanted more information, that would
I'm happy to share for share notes. There are books written on that, and I've actually taken his classes, and it's it's amazing. It becomes in your cellular DNA. However, that's not the end of the story. It can be reversed.
Okay, well then that's important too. Thank you. And that's why, I'm hoping that to have this these episodes be a message of hope, right? And to share the hope.
Absolutely.
So I love that you shared that. So thank you very much. And so as we're winding down our conversation, Jennifer, was there anything else that you wanted to make sure that you shared today? Or is there any top tips you have for your colleagues, from seasoned physicians to medical students, or even those considering med school?
I think I would sum it all up by saying it's okay to be human, and doctors are human. And even though the training tries to sort of trick us into thinking we're not human, um, I found that really, like Wanda was saying, like I didn't really get my life into balance until I accepted that. And um, I think that what you said also about sharing stories, it reminded me of something I read early on in my journey. I think Brene Brown says something about once you share your story, you eliminate the shame, because the shame can't exist in the light. And so I um, just want to encourage anyone who's having a hard time, whether you're an early trainee or seasoned physician, to just reach out. There are organizations like the Lorna Breen Foundation I mentioned. Reach out to me if you want. I'm online. My website is just my name, jenniferlycette.com. I'm not a psychiatrist or a counselor, but I'm happy to talk to anyone who feels that they're alone. We don't want to lose anyone else in our profession.
Right, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I have in the past shared a list of free and confidential resources for physicians. So I'll put that in the show notes once again, so people have that. And I also I had shared a post last fall where anyone who coaches physicians can put their contact information. And I think at least 50 physicians or 50 people responded. So I'll link that as well. And Wanda, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience as we wind down?
Well, the easiest way to get me is a very simple website, and it's my name. It's Wanda Fox, WandaFox.net. And then I will also share those books for you for your show notes, because it's powerful information.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And was there anything else about the work that you do that you wanted to wind down sharing as a holistic wellness coach?
I am always open to conversations, because I don't think people need to suffer through mental wellness concerns. And as I said before, mental wellness is multifaceted. So whereas something might be concerning for a neurosurgeon, an educator might have the same symptoms. They're on a different level. But anything that steals our joy and steals our peace, and robs us of us living a fulfilling life, is a mental wellness concern. So those can all be addressed. And with the approach that I use, we work through harnessing the power of the gut microbiome, which can send new signaling to your brain. So that's why I like to share with people, there is hope and there are corrections. So please reach out to someone. Don't suffer in silence.
Well, thank you. I love that very much. And I think each of us have had struggle. Well, everybody, right? Human, right? And they're human struggles. And we say that doctor struggles are human struggles. And it's normal to struggle. It would be abnormal if there weren't any struggles, right? And that there are people that want to help. There's other physician colleagues, and there's coaches such as Wanda, and just nice doctors that might not be coaches that want to support their colleagues, right? So there is hope. And I just want to thank you both for joining me. I loved this conversation. And let's see. So and you can find me on LinkedIn.
I love LinkedIn.
Yeah, me too. I've had a great time over the last year and connected with so many wonderful people. It's been awesome. And so in closing, to move the needle in healthcare, we all need to raise our voices and we all need to care about each other. We already know that doctors need to care about patients. Patients need to care about doctors too. So stand up, doctors, and let's stand up for doctors.
Yes.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you so much.